To get a perspective on what exactly is happening in and around the Quad and what the events of this week actually mean, let's speak to Alexander Downers, Australia's longest-serving foreign minister, and therefore it's a real pleasure to get a chance to speak to him. Mr. Downer, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, I'm sure there must be a sense of some disappointment in Australia that the entire Quad had to be cancelled, and cancelled in a rather dramatic last-minute manner.
Yeah, there's no doubt. There's no doubt about that. It was very disappointing that President Biden decided to stay in Washington to deal with the budget deadlock that they have there, and then, of course, the other leaders, with the exception of Prime Minister Modi, were not going to come to Australia. So, look, for the Quad, this is a setback.
Looking at the importance of Quad specifically from an Australian point of view, from the time when you were the foreign minister, you were the longest-running foreign minister, has Australia itself made a fairly definite shift now in its thinking, recognizing that China poses a certain sort of a challenge and a certain sort of a threat, and therefore steps are going to have to be taken to confront that and to find as many partners as possible?
China just needs to understand that it doesn't have free rein in the Indo-Pacific region to change the status quo through the use of force. And that the Indo-Pacific needs to be a zone of peace, an area of peaceful coexistence and common exchange. So I think the Quad is a really important message that we send to China, but more broadly to the world.
If you just look at a map of the Indian Ocean and this entire part of the world, it's very clear how defense cooperation could actually be happening between India and Australia. I mean, if you look at there's the Andaman Islands, which is obviously Indian, and then you've got Christmas Island and others which are Australian down there. If India and Australia were to work in a very strategic manner, they'd pretty much be controlling the entire access to the Indian Ocean. Is that the sort of thinking now you think, far more closely knit defense cooperation? India has not traditionally been part of any military alliances, but do you think that's the sort of thinking that is increasingly taking ground now?
You quite rightly point to the geographical significance of our two countries to the Indian Ocean. That means that through collaboration, through our militaries, particularly our navies, increasingly getting to know each other, working together, understanding each other's doctrines, that we can send a very strong message to the region. And I think Prime Minister Modi's visit to Australia will help to reinforce that.
All right, Mr. Downer, thank you so much for joining us. And let's see what emerges concretely from those meetings that the Prime Minister Modi is going to be happening in Australia. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm sure they'll be very successful.
Thank you so much.